We'll start within another 3 minutes. Is it okay, Dr. Ranjit?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yes. Okay, it's about time. We have waited almost 5 minutes for the others to join. So, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome you all for this CME activity organized by the Asian Association of Transfusion Medicine Sri Lanka chapter. And we have an interesting topic today, which is plasma fractionation and protein therapy, the basics to know. To speak about this topic, we have Dr. Ranjit Ajmani. Dr. Ranjit holds a doctorate in biomedical engineering from the Indian Institute of Technology. And he has worked at the National Institute of Health, USA, and faculty at the PGI Chandigarh. He has contributed to various policies and processes in the field of plasma fractionation in India and Southeast Asia, established operations of two plasma fractionation companies in India. He has served as the national expert for the plasma fractionation program at NACO, Government of India. Is a member of the organizing committee for WHO conducted workshops on blood component therapy, plasma fractionation, and hemovigilance at CRO, the visiting faculty and member of academic and research council in various institutions. Dr. Ranjit Ajmani is a passionate teacher, mentor, a profiled speaker, creative writer, and an influencer. Over to you, Dr. Ranjit, to talk about the plasma fractionation and protein therapy, the basic.
Thank you, Dr. Bandara, for wonderful uh, introduction. I don't know whether I can justify to all that, whatever you said, but let me make an attempt and take you through this journey on plasma. It's a fairly complex one, but still, let's see how we reach there. So let me share my screen.
Yes.
Is it visible?
Yes, you are visible. And
Screen is also visible?
Yes, sir. You are in the full screen mode as well.
yes,
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think the plasma and plasma fractionation, its technical and scientific aspects. I just wanted to say that at many of the forums, I do speak about the business, about the complexity of its operation, etc., etc. But at this forum, I have restricted myself to purely scientific and the technical part of it, in order to make sure we stay pretty much on the on the topic. In the sense of it, I understand this entire audience is more related to science and technology, so I think let's do that. So the story of blood and plasma product, I think what we have to remember about blood, it's an essential medicine, and that's why we see that blood saves many lives, not one. And we see the holdings of blood donation camp, and also probably there's no substitute for the blood. If blood is needed to treat patient or patients, there's no other substitute other than blood. And also 1 unit of blood can save many lives. This was not a conventional wisdom. This has come over a period of time. It has evolved very well. And how does it save many lives? So if you see, earlier convention was that you take 1 unit of blood, you go for the RH group, you go for the whether it's viral testing procedures, and you can give it to the patient. But what has happened over a period of time within the technology space, and again, this was not a rocket science, it was a pretty much simple separation technique where the blood was separated into red cells, platelets, fresh frozen plasma, and plasma can further be divided into cryopoor plasma and cryoprecipitate. That means the 1 unit of blood at least can help for different categories of patients. And again, this has happened with a simple application of technology. When we talk of technology, we are not necessarily talking about the rocket science. We are talking of any process, any technical method which may help the community, the society at large, is a technology because it enriches the society from one or the other perspective. So these 4 different components of blood can help 4 different degrees of patients, and that's where it happens. But if you look at the plasma, over the globe, this number may vary, but it is in the larger context of Asia, only 20% of plasma is clinically utilized, while the 80% of the plasma remains unutilized in the clinical setting. But this may vary from country to country, setup to setup, seasons to seasons, etc., etc. So what do we do with the plasma? This is a very, very important thing which one has to look. So one has to remember that plasma is one of the costliest fluid on this earth, more than a barrel of a petrol. And it is a store of many life-saving medicines like albumin, immunoglobulin, factor 8, factor 9, etc. Specific antibodies like rabies, tetanus, etc. also is present in a special kind of plasma. And it is also contains specific antibodies to the natural response like Zika, Ebola, and now we have enough seen during the COVID time. And if this plasma, which is a storehouse of so many proteins, so many important medicine, if it is not used, it's a criminal waste as a society. And it's a huge financial loss to any country, any blood bank, and there's a destroying cost to it as well. And if this plasma is not used for making this product, the country has to import the plasma product, which means you have to incur more expenditure for an exchange of these products. So if this plasma is utilized, for the fractionation, it is a road towards the sufficiency of plasma product in the country, and it's surely revenue generation model for the blood bank. So very simple process. If I had to say, you take the plasma, you pool the plasma, you subject it for the fractionation, and these are the product. This look pretty simple in 3 cartoons, but the process is fairly complex. But this I just wanted to start on so that we have some sense, what it is after all. So let's get into more detail. What are these products which come from the plasma? So this impressive list of about 20 different kind of plasma protein might come up. So when we talk of plasma protein, most of the time the product which comes to our mind is albumin and immunoglobulin, and sometimes factor VIII. But believe me, these are just the 19 products I have listed it, and there's a long big list which may come down the line as the technology evolves. So, and these plasma products are used in different clinical medical situations like hemophilia A, hemophilia B, where you use factor VIII, factor IX. In case of surgery, you use the albumin, you use sometimes fibrin glue to seal the tissue. In case of PID, again, you use huge amount of immunoglobulin. In case of burn, you use a lot of albumin. In shock and trauma, you use the albumin. In obstetrics and gynec, again, you use fibrin glue, sometimes albumin, and of course, RH negative. When RH for RH negative mother, you use the anti-D. In case of animal bite, we use the rabies immunoglobulin. In case of organ transplant, it is the fibrinogen and thrombin. And this is just a very small list which I have presented here. But if you look at like within the PID, there are 400 different indication diseases where the immunoglobulin is used. So that's where, we have to see its wider application both in adult as well as in the pediatric population, in men and women both. So that means these products have a very wider reach in the sense of its clinical utility. So what is the plasma fractionation? Basically, it encompasses a very important component is the raw material, which is plasma. Then its process of production, how it's manufactured. Then there is a process of viral inactivation, and then the final products come out of this. And also, I think it's important to remember there are different types of plasma based on the origin of plasma and based on the storage and processing of plasma. So based on the origin of plasma, one is called as a recovered plasma, which is recovered from the blood bank through the blood donation. So when there is a blood donation, the red cell platelets go away to the patient. There is a plasma which is sitting, which I said about 80% is clinically unutilized, is called as a recovered plasma because it is recovered from the blood bank. Then there is called as a source plasma or apheresis plasma. And in this case, the apheresis plasma is most of the places in the world, other than 1 or 2 countries across the world. The source plasma is a more paid activity, which means a person goes to a plasma center, not the blood center. He or she donates the plasma and he gets compensated for that plasma. And these rules and regulations for source plasma vary from country to country. And it's most of the source plasma come from the 5 countries in the world, which is North America, Czech Republic, Austria, Germany, China, and Hungary. These are the 5 major countries which contribute to about 80% of the global plasma, or more than 85% of the global plasma. And this is a paid activity, while recovered plasma is a non-remunerated. And within the source plasma, there is another category of plasma called as hyperimmune plasma. And these hyperimmune plasma have a specific titer and level of antibodies, which is specific to that antigen. So that's why it is called as hyperimmune plasma. Now, based on the storage condition and processing, the fresh frozen plasma, which means a plasma which is extracted and immediately subjected to -30, -70 degrees centigrade, depending again the law of the land. And this plasma is a very rich in factor VIII, and this is called as a fresh frozen plasma. From this plasma, if you extract out cryoprecipitate, it is called as a cryopure plasma or double depleted plasma. Then there's a normal human plasma. When the blood is componentized and the plasma is prepared and stored within 24 hours, this is called as a normal human plasma. And this is not a very rich source of factor VIII because within that time frame, the factor VIII depletion happens and you will not be able to make good factor VIII. So these are two different types of plasma, which I explained. Then how this plasma, which is there in the blood center or in the plasma center, how it migrates to the fractionation site. So typically a fractionating company will do the inspection, audit and approval of a center. And it's a very, very lengthy process. It runs into sometime at least the first time it runs into at least 5 days or maybe 7 days. So it's a very long procedure in which a lot of data, a lot of training record, etc., is inspected, audited, and it undergoes approval process. Once it is approved, there is a supply agreement, which means the blood center or plasma center will supply X quality of plasma to this particular company. And then there are a lot of documents which come along with this agreement, which is a donor list. And this donor list contains a lot of confidential and non-confidential information both. But the donor list remains confidential as far as the fractionation company is concerned, though it does not have the name of donor, but it has the barcode, which can be tracked for the next 20-25 years. So the barcode is designed very specially because the plasma is stored at -20 and in some cases -70. So these are very specially designed barcodes which are used to put it on the plasma bag. Then there's a certificate of quality which contains the information of number of bag, the kits which were used, the method which was used to test the plasma, etc., etc. And this is also there along with this. And there is the invoice of the plasma. And there are more like, the shipment documents, for example, the air bill, etc., etc. So these are the documents which are that is how the plasma moves from blood center to a fractionation company. So each bag is barcoded. Each bag has a very heavy documentation. Each bag, each box of these plasma bags is barcoded. So which means there's a barcode on the bag, there's a barcode on the box. So it's a double track. It is temperature controlled system. And there's a map of each box, which means within that entire system, electronically, a map is available where you can locate which box is on the which shelf, on which side, etc., etc. So it's a very, what we talk about the IEML today, these in healthcare. So this is how it is used to do the justice with the data tracking. Now, at the plasma fractionation site, there are different areas to store the plasma. All right. But most of it, they are maintained either at -20 or less than -20. So -20 is the upper limit if I have to talk about. So there's a one area which is called as a received plasma. So plasma comes from the blood or plasma center and it stays in the received area. Then this received plasma undergoes the documentation verification. It undergoes certain more changes from box to the corrugated boxes into a plastic cages. And this plasma is labeled under test plasma. Between the received and under test plasma there is some leakage or if there's some problem happens in the transportation, those bags are removed. And the plasma bag which are intact, the barcodes are intact. They are recorded within the system of the fractionation company. These are called as under test plasma. Now, this plasma is called as a quarantine plasma. What is the quarantine plasma? This quarantine plasma concept is there in China, US, and Europe, but it's really not existent in the entire Asian country. And just to give a little more perspective to it, backtracking. Backtracking means you should be able to track each vial to the product, to the bag, each bag of plasma which you use in the system. So this is backtracking system. Repeat donor base. So it's very important, at least where there's a source plasma collection, that for example, in the US, if a person who has come to donate the plasma, let's say on the January 1st, so his plasma will remain under quarantine until the end of February, 60 days. Only when he comes to donate the plasma in the first week of March, his plasma which he has donated on January 1st will be released for the manufacturing. And the reason being, it is considered to be the window period, or a person whose plasma who has donated on January 1st may have viruses which are not detectable. So his plasma of January 1st will be released in the first week of March, provided his results in the March 1st week come clean. Now the plasma which he donates on March 1st will stay in the quarantine phase for the March and for the April, and in the May 1st week, again, if he comes and donates the plasma of March 1st will go. And thus I'm giving you a very theoretical example. It's a much more complex process. And this is called as inventory hold, my last point. And this quarantine concept of plasma itself can be a topic of entire, webinar, because it's a very important concept considering the vulnerability of safety of plasma product. And then this plasma is released if it meets all the criteria of the company. And the quality assurance department of particular fractionation company releases the plasma for the fractionation. Right? Now you have a plasma available with you. Now, plasma fractionation technology. So there are 4 different kinds of technologies available. One is called as a cone, which is classical technology, which has been used in most of the plants across the globe. About, I would say, 99.5% use the cone and chromatography both, which is a second hybrid model. Third is pure chromatography plant. There are only 3 chromatography based plant available across the world. And then there's a new technology coming based on the charge separation. And this is called as a separation-based technology. But of course, the product from the last technology, separation-based, has not come to the market. So this technology has not been clinically evaluated so far, but its plant is under construction in Australia. So where does it start? So plasma product journey starts during the Second World War, when Pearl Harbor attack happened. And you can see these pictures of December 1941. And so at that point in time, there was during Second World War, a lot of casualties were there. And these are the pictures of Second World War. And first time ever, the plasma product which was shipped from the Cone laboratory from the Boston to West Coast of America, these products were used, mostly albumin and fibrin glue. And you can see the soldiers, and the albumin was given, their wounds were sealed with the fibrin glue. So this was the beginning of plasma product, where the plasma product were used on experimental basis, and it saves many lives. But that is not end of it. There were many challenges alongside with it. Let's get into that part later. So what is fundamentally cone fractionation? It's a very schematic diagram as I'm presenting it to you. So if you see the plasma on the left side of the panel, so this plasma is pooled into the batch size of maybe 2000 liter, 5000 liter. And these pooled plasma undergoes a separation method, series-wise and parallel side. So you can see things are happening in series and things are happening in the parallel. So from the fraction 1, you get the fibrinogen, factor 8, and other component proteins. Then from fraction 2 and 3, you can get IVIG. From fraction 3, you can get antitrypsin, antithrombin, and globulins. And from 4, you can get some more protein. And from the last, which is the fraction 5, you get the albumin. So albumin comes towards the end of the chain in the code technology. I am really not presenting you pictures of chromatography, because this is the separation technology which you run to plasma through a column, and eventually you separate the protein based on certain procedures. So as I said, the cone was developed during the Second World War. And here you expose the plasma to low temperature, different pH, ethanol, resulting into systematic separation of various protein components. And these proteins are purified, and others is separate into different entities. So what happened during this time, you can see this is a report of 1949, 27 December, Commission on Plasma Fractionation. So if you get into this report, it contains a lot of detail, what happened when plasma was used, and how plasma fractionation program should evolve in the country This is a very important document if you look at in the milestone and in the history and in the journey of plasma fractionation. So what happened? At different point in time in the history of plasma fractionation, there was a major outbreak of hepatitis B. There was HIV transmission from plasma product, and thousands of people suffered and died, unfortunately. And this led to scientific development that how to make plasma protein safer and safer and safer. And this endeavor goes till today as we are talking, because one would accept the fact that no biological can be 100% safe, especially when it is coming from blood. One can try to reduce the margin of error as much as it can, but it can never be zero, which means a plasma product can never be 100% safe claim on the vial. So one can just try the best, and this leads to a scientific development. So this is a very important book called as a Vial 023. And this book is written by Gary William Cross. And this is a memoir to his son who dies of HIV in North America in, I think, in early 90s, when the outbreak happened of use of anti-hemophilic factor 8 in the treatment of hemophilia. And unfortunately, his son Brad contracts the HIV. And this is a very, very long story and a very graphic book which describes the journey of a father dealing with, HIV, use of HIV contaminated plasma product and how it goes. And unfortunately, he dies at the age of 15. And in this case, his father is not able to see the pain of his son. And he says he takes his son to hospice, which is, one-way traffic, and people go alive but never return back, unfortunately. And in this book, it also describes how the court battle happened and how 10,000 hemophilic contracted HIV. And I'm not telling you a story of 1960s or 50s. This is a story of mid-90s. So which means how vulnerable this can be. And the book title, and it goes into a corporate fight and the court law, etc., etc. Now, the Vial 023 title comes when there was a deposition happening of a nurse, and by mistake, she discloses that she gives the Vial 023 to Brad. And that established that Vial 023, which was given to Brad, was made up of a plasma which was contaminated with HIV virus. So that's why I'm saying the technology, when we are using it, we have to use it in most judicious way, in a very, very responsible way. And this is just a book to share that experience. But and this unfortunate tragedy of HIV happened across the globe, and many, many hemophilic perished in this unfortunate episode in the history. So there's a public threat of the new viruses as well, because we test our blood for HIV, hepatitis B, C, syphilis, and malaria, and maybe hepatitis A, parvo B19. But this is still a public threat in the sense of supply of blood and plasma. And also it depends on the geography. And if you look at the high-income countries, middle-income countries, and low-income countries, and the prevalence of HIV, B, and C, you can see it varies. And you can see the numbers are starkly different between high income, middle income, and low income. So I think this is also a very economic component which we have to keep in mind. And this is not because of the money part, it is because of the entire healthcare structure, awareness, funding, etc., etc. So this also has a relevance to the different socio-political landscape. So how viral transmission can happen? So typically to make a batch of 2,500 liter or 5,000 liter, there are about 10,000 bags or 20,000 bags of plasma are tested. And you can imagine if one bag was not properly tested, or it escaped the safety net, or there was a case of seroconversion, the entire pool can get contaminated. And this is a reality of it. We are talking of it. So that's why the testing of plasma plays a very important role. So each unit of blood is tested for HIV 1 and 2, hepatitis B, C, syphilis, and malaria. This I'm quoting from India, but in most of the developing countries, or at least in Southeast Asia, that is the case. But it may vary in some countries. Some tests are done, some are not done. So what you do is Each unit is tested for these 5 markers, and these are all known markers, right? But we also know there is a window period under which we can, detect the virus. And then there's a limitation of technology. Even if you use the NAT or PCR, it's not possible to detect the virus the very next day on onset of infection. So there is a limitation of technology. And the best of the technology, unfortunately, cannot give you the viral load or virus identification just the very next day or in the next 24 hours. So this is a human limitation which we have to deal with it. Then again, origin of raw material can equally contribute to it. So when we select a donor or a blood or plasma donor, how careful we will have to be. The testing of blood and plasma donation, which I explained. Then epidemiological surveillance of the donor population. And there is enough studies available that epidemiological surveillance is a very, very important part to make the blood and the plasma product safe. And then, of course, the good manufacturing practice. And there's a post-donation information system in order to make sure if any donor comes positive, how to defer this donor and not to allow him for the next donation. So, the confidence of screening pathogen is very, very important. And then the window period and seroconversion of certain viruses, and you pool so many bags of plasma. These are the fundamental challenges which we face. So there are methods of viral inactivation. So, and I would say pathogen reduction in one sense, because inactivation is a virus. You kill the virus, or you bring the virus to such a level that it is no more infective when it is present into the plasma product. So one method could be pasteurization, and it is called as a weight hit. And then there's a terminal dry heat. Heat the product, maybe at 70 degree, maybe at 80 degree, maybe 100 degree for half an hour, let's say factor 8. So depending on your cocktail, you design a method in which you are able to kill the virus or the DNA of virus so that it is no more infective. Vapor heat is another method. SD method, solvent detergent method, is considered to be one of the very robust method of killing the envelope viruses, in which typically there's a solvent in which you mix the product and then you add the detergent, and eventually you remove the solvent, you remove the detergent, and the product becomes safe. Then acid pH, you decrease the product pH and you bring down, you inactivate the virus. Irradiation is also one of the method of viral inactivation. Then virus removal, either you can do through the precipitation or chromatography or nanofiltration. I just would like to add here one thing, that typically when you apply a method of viral inactivation in a product, you use the combination of the first site and the second site. So for example, if you are using for factor 8, you might want to use the first as a nanofiltration, you filter the virus, and then you may want to heat the product, dry heat, terminal heat at 100 degree for half an hour or 80 degree for 10 hours, depending on your cocktail. So these methods are used, which is called as a orthogonal method, which means you do not want to use 2 steps of heat or 2 steps of chemical treatment, because that may not be very, very effective. So WHO recommends orthogonal methods. So when you select a method, what is very important? It should be effective for both. Sorry, there is a mistake on the first line. RDNA or the RNA or DNA core. It should be effective for both nucleic acid. It should also be effective for enveloped and non-enveloped viruses. It should also take care of known and unknown viruses. It should give high viral reduction, which means when you apply the method, you should be able to remove or kill the virus to the high degree. Then it should not really affect the protein integrity. Otherwise, this method is no more good. And it should also not leave behind any toxic or undesired property or a matter in the protein products. And most important, validation. This method should be validatable, which means it should not happen. You have done it once and you can't repeat it. So this method should be effective every time when you apply the method. So this is called as a validation. So any validated method is implied in plasma fractionation program. So in case of viral inactivation, as I said, you should use orthogonal process. and one is used in process and one is end process. What does that mean? That one method you should be able to apply when the product is under process. For example, nanofiltration. So when you're making the product is not fully manufactured, prepared, it hasn't gone to the vial. So this method is called as the in-process viral inactivation. And end process means when the product is already in the vial and you are heating it, are doing something with that. So that is called as end process, and which can be dry heat terminal. And eventually you test the final product when it is ready. But again, this is a very generic, I'm using it. This may not be necessarily true. It would vary from company to company. So I'm giving you a very complex slide, but please, bear with me. So from donor, you donate the blood or plasma. And from here, you test the blood for various markers. And then this blood is stored. And as I said, there is inventory hold, there's a backtracking. And then this plasma goes to the manufacturing site. And that is where quality assurance and GMP comes into the practice. And that is where the viral safety, as I said, step number one step of viral inactivation, and second step of viral inactivation. The final product is prepared, and this product undergoes the post-marketing surveillance hemovigilance program. And eventually you can see the donor and patients are connected. So sometimes these patients become the donor in the course of time. So how this cycle from human to human flows, and again, this may look simple on the PowerPoint, but these 8 steps are very, very complex process, and it undergoes a very stringent norm. And this entire process of right from donor to the product is good 6-month process. So, from the day plasma is available in the system and you get the product, it is about 6 months time we are talking about. And again, this is a red market book following my previous slide. This is a book written by Scott. And again, this is a very heart-wrenching saga written by a young professor from the USA. He comes to India, and unfortunately, one of his students dies in Varanasi, and he has to send his mortal remains to his hometown in the US. And that is where he travels the journey in the Southeast Asia, what happens in the medical science. And this book talks about the blood donation, the cadaver, the child trafficking, the organ transplant, the sperm donation, surrogacy, etc. So this is a book which also talks about the ethical part of our profession. And I think this book is a very, very revealing and heart-wrenching. And it also gives us an insight that what can go wrong in sense of the process in which we go through. So why fractionation we should be doing? So blood is a very, very important scarce resource. It is a finite blood amount, and human blood, as I said, has no substitute. And optimum use of blood component is not just an economic necessity, but a scientific obligation. And to do this, componentization and fractionation is the most efficient way, and self-sufficiency for the nation. So that's why we should do the fractionation. And by doing fractionation, what we do is, how do we travel the pyramid? So most important part is you will diagnose the disease, then the product should be available. When the product is available, these products should be affordable. By doing it, you will be able to improve the patient care, which is poor at this moment. And by this, you probably would increase the life expectancy. And I can give you an example of hemophilia. Maybe 20 years back, the average life of hemophilia was maybe 20 years, 30 years in the Western world, 40 years. But now it has crossed more than 60, 65 years. So which means these patients also can lead a full bloom life, and they can be a very productive member of the community rather than a burden. So I think this is something, very important for us to remember, that the patient who were leading a very crippled life because of non-availability or affordability or diagnosis of disease, if we are able to do fractionation in our country or travel towards it, we are contributing a huge to the society by helping these patients, which at this moment lead a very crippled life. Their life expectancy is low. The patient care is really, really in a difficult situation. So plasma therapies are really unique. As I said, raw material is unique. It cannot be synthesized. It cannot be manufactured in any laboratory in the world, right? And this is only a branch of biotechnology. From one raw material, you make many products, right? I mean, from plasma, you make albumin, IVIG, factor 8, factor 9. But most of the time, one raw material gives you one product. But that's really just opposite. That's different here. The major concern is the viral safety. That's why the plasma has to be safe to make the product safe. As I said, it's a very complex process. It takes about 6 to 8 months. Its manufacturing is very costly and cost capital intensive. The regulatory requirements are extremely robust and stringent. You manufacture for a very small number of people, but really you should not be thinking of it. The statistical number of patients does not really define our goal because each life is very important if it happens to be you. So I think saving each life should be our goal, but just wanted to make a point that the number of patients may be low when you discuss, but each life is important and our endeavor should be to save every life. And the therapy, again, as I said, for small population, and there are very, very limited number of manufacturers. So there are only about 70, 75 plasma fractionation plants across the globe. And there's a huge untapped market for these plasma products across the globe. So as I said, the technology should be used to bring the social change in order to elevate the lives of people. And what new technology can do? It can provide you better yield. It can provide you alternate material like the recombinant way of working on it as transgenic. It can definitely improve the safety of plasma product. Now more infrastructure is, which means earlier if the fractionation plant would take 5 years to get ready, now it could be 3 years. There could be more tailor-made fractionation plant available based on the various technology platform and processes. Industry academia can also play a very important role. And eventually this social impact will be the change in the quality of life. And that is where our role comes into the play. So if you look at the evolution of hemophilia care, just to give you one example, in 1950, it started with the whole blood. Then came FFP and cryoprecipitate. And then came the plasma-derived factor VIII. Then came recombinant and the transgenic. And then various generations of factor VIII, recombinant factor VIII. And now you will have seen in the recent past, just in the last 2-3 months, the gene therapy has come into existence for the hemophilia B and hemophilia A both. So you can see the impressive journey of about last 80 years that how technology has enabled hemophilia care. And this is something very important to remember. And today from, we are talking of less than 20 products coming from plasma, but there are 1,000 proteins at least present in the plasma, and we really do not know their specific clinical activity and how they can be extracted. So this holds a huge potential to increase the list of plasma product by bringing a lot of change in the process manufacturing, also doing R&D work and developing the technology where we are able to extract the proteins which are present in a very, very small quantity in plasma. I think this is my last but one slide, or maybe the last one. So this was the way telephones were used way back, and this is the way now mobiles are used so extensively across the globe. What it has done, you can see a lady in the hut and a bright young lady in urban setting. The mode of communication has remained the same, but it has brought so much social change in the entire world, right? This was the way the movies were shot way back. And in the life of Pi, it's such a technical superior movie where only 85% animated tiger was used and 15% only dyed tiger was used to make this movie. So how the technology revolution is happening in every aspect of our life, and I'm sure you will relate to this the most. This was the way the blood was stored way back, and this is a very elegant way of storing the blood now, from bottle to bag, from a storage to a temperature controlled, computer controlled refrigerator. So I think this technology has changed every aspect of our life, and it has a huge impact on our healthcare and social life. I think this is where the message is that plasma fractionation is a highly technical method, and it can separate proteins from the plasma, and it can save many lives if we are able to do this work, within the country and able to help the country become self-sufficient on the plasma product. I think this is the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ranjit, for this very elaborative lecture on basics of plasma fractionation. If the audience have any questions, we can take few questions since we have about 10 minutes more from the allocated time. To start with, I will ask a question from Dr. Ranjit. So in Sri Lanka also, we have been collecting blood from the National Blood Transfusion Service. We are the sole collector of blood in our country. So as you said, we also use around 20% of our plasma. Most of them earlier used to be not used and wasted, but now we have understood this importance of this resource material. Can you tell something that contract fractionation, that is, we export our plasma for a manufacturer and getting the products out? Can you elaborate a few words on this concept of contract fractionation?
Sure. See, the contract fractionation is an arrangement between a country who has a spare plasma, and it goes to a country where their fractionation facility. And this is what I have done for the first time in India when I returned to India from the US, and where the plasma collection was not permitted in early 2000. And so I started interacting with Korean Green Cross at that point in time, which became a Green Cross now. And I promised them that I will send them 10,000 liter plasma from 1 billion people. But unfortunately, I couldn't send even 10,000 liter. I was only able to send 8,500 liter, right? That was a journey to start with. And now India collects close to, I would say, over 1 million liter of plasma, right? So one point I wanted to make, that the plasma collection can be increased. That's point number one. Point number two, when I started doing contract fractionation work, typically the fractionation company will come and audit the plasma centers, our blood center. They will undergo, they will ask you many questions, how plasma is stored, how testing is done, how old data is there. But typically, they would expect you to keep the data for the next 10 years once you're given the plasma. And they will also have to keep the data for the next 10 years for each vial. Like in India, we are supposed to keep the plasma data for the next 10 years in hard copy form and electronic form. And same for the product, in order to make sure, God forbid, if there's any problem which comes later on, you are able to track whether the bag came from which particular blood bank, from which consignment, what was the date, who was the donor, can we backtrack that donor? And it did happen to me when I was doing the contract fractionation. Though it was a false signal, but we had to do that work. And by the time the donor moved from the city where I used to live to the another city, then I specifically traveled to that city, talked to the donor, requested him to give one more donation, maybe 10 ml, and we tested his blood, got his plasma, it was clean. Then we realized it was a false signal. I'm explaining you that this all happened, but eventually India started making the plasma product first time by using the contract fractionation, albumin, IVIG, and of course, in my earlier assignment, we were the first one in the world, in the country, to make factor VIII using the Indian plasma. Till that point in time, Indian plasma was not used to make factor VIII. Because of the poor storage condition, the yield used to be very poor. So I would like to emphasize, if in order to go for the contract fractionation, it will be good to sit down before you get onto this journey, make an internal plan, how to make your process robust, so that will minimize your plasma rejection, plasma discard. That way you will save a lot of money. You will probably pass the audit in the first time, and you will be able to get maximum amount of products from the plasma coming from Sri Lanka. But this certainly can be done, and I think it's a good start in my view.
Yeah, thank you very much.
I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, definitely you have answered. And one more question, just for the curiosity. As you said, a huge amount of plasma is required to run this type of fractionation plant. In your experience, the smallest fractionation plant, how much plasma they need to run the just to run the factory for the operations?
I think now, as I said earlier, the bigger the plant, better it is. But that concept is existent only in certain sense. But now there are tailor-made plants available and which can run very efficiently somewhere between 80,000 to 100,000 liters of plasma. But again, I would say even 50,000 may be viable. I'm just saying it theoretically. If you have designed the plant in such a way that from each liter of plasma, you are going to make 5 products, which means your technology supports extraction of all 5 products, which means the revenue generation will happen from 5 products. How that will happen if you make a good plasma? How you will make a good plasma, which means you will store the plasma at a lowest temperature. So from a good plasma, you will make a good product. From good product in sense of the quality, you will make more than 3 or 4 products, which means your revenue generation will be more, which means your plant will be technically and financially viable. So this whole chain, starting from plasma to the product, to the size of the plant, they are all interconnected. And this is a very intense exercise, which, countries need to be countries need to get into it in a much detailed fashion so that they are really not missing any crucial step. They should not think that, okay, whatever the plasma has, we will get all the products. That's really not the case.
Yes.
So how do we intermittently test the plasma? If we are realizing our plasma temperature, there is a swing, right? How to make sure that swing is minimum, etc., etc. So I think this is a very elaborate exercise, but it is definitely doable.
Yeah, thank you.
Sure.
Dr. Kalyan, you have raised your hand.
Thank you, sir. I have a question to Dr. Ranjit, sir.
Yes.
Dr. Ranjit, sir, thanks for your nice presentation. It was really awesome. And I have a question that is, I would like to know the differences in the perspective of efficacy of the plasma products, which has been taken from a recovered plasma versus source plasma. Which one is better and why?
I think as far as the product is concerned, efficacy is concerned, there's no difference between these 2 products. So scientifically, absolutely, one cannot differentiate that this product has come from the recovered plasma or the source plasma. So this is on the clinical side, but on the non-clinical side, in sense of the yield, there is a difference. So that's a more on the business question rather than a scientific question.
Okay, and the second part of this question is that as India has got a fractionation center, I think there are several centers. So how do you manage such a big amount of plasma? Is it from the recovered plasma or from the source plasma?
All Indian plasma center, fractionation companies, they can only use the recovered plasma because under the Indian law, you cannot have source plasma. The apheresis of plasma is only allowed for the clinical condition, not for the commercial purposes. So Indian law still prohibits collection of plasma for the plasma fractionation.
So, sir, do you think that this legislation has to be changed for the improvement of this plasma fractionation center?
Absolutely, because see, today India, just to give you a contrast, you asked a very valid question. Look at India, fractionate, let's say about 1.2 million liter of plasma or 1.5. China fractionates 17 million liters.
My God, yeah.
Right, close to 16 times more than India, almost a comparable number of people. And after that, also, they import albumin. China imports the albumin, even after 16 times. So what is happening, if you look at all the developing countries, look at entire Africa, there is a one plant in Durban, just one plant, maybe 300, 400,000 liters. Entire Africa, there is not a single other. There is another plant. Entire Latin America, there's a one plant in Argentina, 50,000 liters. In Mexico, there's a one plant which is not operational. So all the developing nations, whether it's Africa, Asia, or Latin America, they are all import dependent. And they are dependent on the plasma which is coming from 5 countries which I mentioned: North America, China, Austria, Germany, and Hungary. And this is not right thing in the science. Tomorrow, God forbid, something like COVID happens, and the moment a plasma product is prohibited, scientifically, regulatory wise, or politically. Look at what is happening with the Ukraine-Russia war, right? These are the political realities which we are dealing with. Now in Ukraine, there was a plasma fractionation plant. There is a fractionation plant. Now they are not able to produce albumin for their own soldiers. So this albumin is coming from another country as a humanitarian aid. So we live in a very politically volatile scenario and conflicting scenario. And I have really not mentioned one more thing on my slide, that in the US, there is a kit available which is called as a lyophilized plasma, which is there in every first aid kit on the war front. Because on the war front, there is a case, there may be a case of stabbing, gunshot or anything else. And this is not a clinical condition. This is an accidental condition. So where if you are able to infuse the plasma, if you are able to apply the fibrin glue, you will save the life of soldiers. Right. So this plasma product have a huge value in sense of peace and also on the war front. So under the situation, political volatility we have to look in a larger way.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. I have another technical question.
Please do.
Regarding the quality of the plasma. If the plasma is full with fat, or we call it a chylous plasma, is it good for fractionation or to produce PDMPs?
Sorry, I didn't get the question.
Okay, the plasma, the person who are having high cholesterol in his blood, the plasma becomes very much whitish or chylous. So is it a good source, or we have to discard that plasma?
No, we can do it. We can apply first method as a filtration and take care of the lipid contents.
Okay, so we need a filtration device or something like that.
Correct.
Okay.
So that is where your technology will play very important role. And typically, if you look at the Asian plasma, which is more lipidemic in nature because the high cholesterol and triglyceride contents.
Right, sir. Thank you, sir.
So if a guy has taken a huge big cheese, pizza or a cheese sandwich, and he comes and donates the blood, then you have a good fatty plasma.
Thank you, sir. So another question, I'm sorry to ask a lot of questions.
Please do.
So how many PDMPs or how many plasma derived products are being produced in India from their own plasma?
7.
That includes the albumin?
Albumin, IVIG, factor 8, factor 9, prothrombin complex, fibrinogen, and even esterase. Okay,
so is there any differences between the quality or the efficacy of the plasma produced in PDMPs produced in India rather than in the Western countries?
As far as clinical efficacy is concerned, I would say no, but their processes are different. And the major difference lies on the inventory hold of plasma, which unfortunately does not happen in Asia, but which is mandatory in case of US FDA, EMEA, and China. In China, in fact, inventory hold is 90 days. And just since you asked me the question, let me clarify it.
Yeah.
So typically in the US, if you see, a person can donate close to 80 to 90 liters plasma in 1 year. 80 to 90 liters. In case of recovered plasma, if a person donates the blood very sacrosanctly, religiously, every 3 months, right? So which means he can donate 4 times in a year. And from each donation, you will get about 250 ml of plasma, which is about a liter from one donor, right? Against which, in the US, a person can donate 800 ml of plasma twice in a week. Twice in a week. Not blood. And multiply this with 52 weeks, it comes to good 90 liters, good to 80 to 90 liters. So that is how a repeat donor base is created, and that is how they're able to track the donors. And there in the US also what they called as a National Deferral Registry, NDR. So if a donor is found to be risky donor, he is deferred for the lifetime or for the duration from all the all the plasma centers. So it's not that he can now go from Baltimore to, let's say, San Francisco and can donate the plasma, because his name will appear in the National Deferral Registry. So there is a centralized pool of deferral registry. And that is how it is very heavily data protected plasma. And in USA, more than 800, 900 centers are there which take care of it.
Yeah. And finally, I would ask a controversial question regarding the VNRD. That means the voluntary non-remunerated donation. So do you think, sir, that in our perspective, we will get more donations in the form of VNRD rather than remuneration that is happening in case of the Western countries, where they take care of the donors and they compensate in some other way? So what do you think, sir?
I think, with no offense to anyone, West or East, right, both have their own, social, political obligations and the landscape, and they need to deal with it. Having said that, I think there's no harm in copying something which is required in order to support our public healthcare system. Now, would I say do exactly the same the way they do it? My answer would be no. Right? We must create our own system of paid donation if at all we are going for the paid donation. Can we ask them to donate 800 ml of plasma twice in a week? Answer may be no, because we don't know the protein content, right? So we do not want them to get depleted on their own plasma protein when they come for donation, which means we may have to go, let's say, once in a month or maybe twice in a month. We don't know right now, right? So we have to evolve a huge regulatory procedure on the scientific side. Then let's come about the paid donation. I think the way we are moving into different economic zones, and we will need to keep our eyes open, ear open, and figure out how to even handle the financial aspect, which is the paid donation part. And we should not be shying away from this reality that if we will not do it for whatever reason, maybe political, maybe scientific, maybe technical, maybe regulatory, our patients are going to suffer. Right. Eventually, if you look, who will suffer? A common man who needs the medicine.
Right.
In order to help this common man, what we need to do is not to get worried about the process, evolve the process. In fact, when I came to India, recovered plasma collection was not permitted. They said, no, we can't allow collection of plasma. You collect the plasma because the donor has donated to give the plasma to the patient. I explained them that yes, red cells you are giving it to the patient, platelets you are giving it to the patient, plasma you are giving it to the patient. Whatever plasma, if you are not using it, you are doing injustice to the donor, because you are throwing his 50% of his body important fluid to the drain.
Right.
He's not aware of it. How offended would he feel when he comes to know that his blood was not completely used? This was the argument. And in fact, the matter went to High Court. In India, it didn't happen that easily. We went to the court and there was a court litigation, and it's all in Google. What I'm saying is not only my imagination, it's all there in the Google. Google God will help you to search so many historical facts, what happened. And in the last 20 years of my journey in India, we developed first program on plasma collection, then hemovigilance program, then change in the Drug and Cosmetic Act, and so on and so forth. Has it come to a full stop? Answer is no. Would it come? Answer is no. So it's an ever evolving process. And that is what I keep saying. The technology is not a rocket science. Technology is a simple process which helps us to help a common man by simple intervention. So now, like data protection, for example, can we have a better way of protecting our plasma in sense of cold storage? Can we have a better technique for the transportation of plasma, which is more efficient, which is green energy? Can we do all that? Answer is yes. Is the work going on? Answer is yes. So that's what I'm saying. The technology has a very important role to play, and provided we use it very judiciously and appropriately.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Okay. Now, I think we have come to the end of the session today.
Sure.
Dr. Ranjit Ajmal, thank you very much for being the resource person today. It was very interesting and interactive. You have shared your experience with us. Thank you very much for sharing your knowledge with us. And of course, I would like to thank for the Indian AATM International India chapter. They have helped us a lot for this CME activities, and also for the Sri Lankan chapter for requesting this event and organizing. Finally, the participants. We had about around 35 online participants, and thank you very much. Wish you all the best, and thank you once again.
Thank you. Thank you. It was a pleasure to be there, and I hope it was useful.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye. Bye.
Thank you.